So we went to the Cinepolis movie theater in Inglewood over there by the SoFi Theater. We went in to watch Sinners in that IMAX theater. So it was really big and it was really bright and it was really vibrant. And we sat in the row B, which was right up front. So we could see everything front and center. So we noticed that a lot of people have given their critique on what was said or what was done. And we really enjoyed watching a lot of people's critiques and trying to see what they thought about the movie. The main takeaways were about people maybe needing to stay steady. Like you had one instance where a guy had a regular job, and although the pay wasn't good and they paid him somewhat in hooch, which is the corn liquor, he wasn't really moving forward. It was just enough to get by. And at first he wanted to stay with that because it was consistent. It was, reliable. And, but he tempted him with a new taste, this North Chicago Irish whiskey, because that particular character had worked for Irish Mafia when he lived in Chicago. So his dress, his attire, everything about him was influenced by the people that he worked for previously. So when he tasted the beer, it was something brand new that he didn't have access to in Mississippi where they were. So it was like a really fine gift. And it made him change his mind that instead of going to the job where he was consistently being paid and he knew he had a job until he dropped, he decided he was going to go take at least that night a job so that he could have access to this new drink, this fine Irish whiskey that was cooled and refreshing. So that's one thing. It's about choosing between what's consistent and reliable and going after the flashy new thing because it's a cool, fresh drink of water kind of situation. That was one of the things they talked about. Another thing they talked about is all of these kind of forbidden fruit kind of things. One forbidden fruit was there was a married woman who wanted to come party, and she was attracted to this young man who was not quite an adolescent. He was right at the stage where he was a young man. He was becoming an adult, and even though she was married, she was attracted to him. He was attracted to her, and even during the time they kind of followed their passions and found each other and partook of each other. It was almost like, okay, so this is talking about maybe within marriage, maybe someone gets, they feel neglected or they feel like they're not getting attention, and then they have the gaze of this young man and it makes them feel young and beautiful again. And so they go to, again, the party because they want to feel young again. And although their relationship wasn't too messy, it wasn't a big thing. It was something that could have just been brushed off as a one night stand or something like that. In the end, she loses, he loses, her, but her, I wondered when she got pulled in to the dark side, she still wanted to protect him. And I didn't know if it was like, did she feel guilty because she cheated on her husband and she felt like she was getting what she deserved when it happened to her, but she didn't want this young boy who was innocent to be pulled under with her. So I was wondering, okay, so is that what Perline's character is going through? She's at this point where she's been taken over to the dark side, but she doesn't want this young man to have to suffer. Even though she hasn't suffered so hard, she knows it's coming. And at some point, maybe she won't be able to have the state of mind where she can think in this manner. Once she becomes a full-fledged monster, she'll just have a craving. and she won't be able to make those kind of decisions. But she did tell him run. So that was one dynamic about forbidden fruit. And then the other forbidden fruit was there was a situation where there was Octoroon, and she grew up around the black people there, but she had moved 2 states away to Arkansas and married a white man so she can live a regular life in the Jim Crow South. And she still was in love with one of the main characters from when they had grew up together, and they were in love with each other as young people. But she harbored a anger that she felt like she had been left behind by him. Even though she had a good life, she's married to a white man who I guess is well off. And at this time, he's trying to tell her, I couldn't have offered you anything better. We couldn't have lived together in the South. And you're somewhere safe with someone in a good situation. And she felt like, okay, she felt, or at least she gave the impression that she felt like he was gaslighting her by saying that. And he was just trying to tell her, he was trying to make it clear there was no future for us in the South. And you had the best way out, and I had to go make my life. I had to go create the life that I wanted and not be given the life that they was going to give me as a black man here in the South. So even she was quick to suspect that, he couldn't have gotten that much money in the North, and that something must be up. And maybe her curiosity and how he got the money is what kept bringing her back. And I don't know if it was to be celebratory, to celebrate his coming up, or to maybe just be like, well, see, look, you abandoned me, and look what happened to you, to kind of rub in his demise, that his eventual demise, as a way to say, you hurt me and now someone's going to hurt you. So was she stuck in that old energy where she was trying to figure a way to get back at him and her hurt, as opposed to just seeing it as what he said? We couldn't be together under the circumstances of the South. You have a better deal where you are. Even if I love you, you're still better off with the white guy that you married and the lifestyle that he could offer you. So there was that other situation of forbidden fruit. And then there was another situation where there was, that has to do with the longing. Everyone's carrying all of this baggage of what happened to them in the past and trying to escape to make a better life somewhere else. And one of the characters, he had a love interest, the voodoo woman, the root woman. And not voodoo, hoodoo, I'm sorry, I said it wrong, hoodoo root worker. And she and him had a child that didn't survive infancy. And his longing was, why couldn't your magic work to save our child? And her faith made her accept the tragedy and have to just accept that was fate. That was what was given by the universe. And she was going to just have to accept it. And he was still sorrowful and wishing that there could have been more. And that point of losing a child maybe was a point of what kind of was the demise of their relationship at that time. There was a break because of that. But he still loved her and cared for her. But he also had to go up north and make a life for himself, a better life, better than what he could be offered as a black man in the South, especially in Mississippi at that point in time. And he went up and again worked for a different mafia, but both brothers worked for two separate mafias, one Italian, one Irish. But these people are talking about the North not necessarily being any better than the South, although they had achieved something. But in their desperation, they had maybe been able to do a heist because the two employers, separate employers, had infighting and had eventually had a kind of massacre because of the fighting over the limited resources that many immigrant societies had access to. When they were pushed into certain neighborhoods that they could only afford, and then they had to fight for any kind of jobs and anything that was going on. There's always this, everyone's trying to get their share, and there's always this animosity between the other ethnic groups who you're in direct competition with for jobs. And so even some of that was mirrored in what they had to do to get the money to be able to come and open up their juke joint. So then, even though both brothers had been soldiers, and we have to assume, since this is the 20s, that they had fought in World War I, that they had experienced all these horrors, tramping around Europe, fighting against Germans and who else, to secure Europe's freedom, but coming back to America and not really having freedom, but the knowledge of that there was freedom somewhere else. So we have to imagine that this is something else that's going through their minds, these characters, as they're trying to create something new and shiny in their Mississippi town, that is still flawed because they still have all this baggage. Everyone has all this baggage, and they're trying to get from up under the weight of what Jim Crow and racism has done. It's sapped away their energy, sapped away their life, sapped away their profits, and they're trying to reclaim the profits, the money, the opportunity that's been lost. And it's maybe part of their drive, but because they have unresolved internal issues, it's also what helps make them victims to the darkness that comes to take them all. So then their adversary is also someone who's been victimized possibly centuries before they meet this person. And he's kind of probably been on the run for who knows how many centuries. There probably could be a whole movie on this one person. And they, at some point in the movie, recount how these people came with their silver tongues, so to say, talking about how Jesus was going to save everybody, and the Lord and this accept this religion, and all it really did is dispossess them of their land and make them beggars, whereas before they had plenty of land, they had plenty to eat, they had clothes on their backs, they had roofs over their head, and how all of this was dispossessed of them and then made them into beggars and wanderers. So it's a brief point that this man talks about this. But it is an important concept of why here he is taken from other people. He's been made into this monster because everything that he had and him and his people had were taken from them. And then they were kind of cast out into the world to almost be there to trip up everybody they came in contact with the darkness that had consumed them. So then there's that issue of the wandering and the longing and the loss within their hearts. And then I guess finally I wanted to talk about the Chinese American couple and their daughter, but it's mainly the Chinese American couple. And their position in Jim Crow South was intermediaries. And we see it not just in America. We see the British used to do this in all of their colonies. They used to go somewhere like Malaysia, Indonesia, somewhere. And when they colonized the area, sometimes some of the local people didn't always want to trade with them, didn't want to have to deal with them. So they could bring in Chinese merchants from China who were always looking for new opportunities because they were maybe oversaturated in China. And they would insert a whole class of Chinese people to be the merchants, to be the accountants, to be the bookkeepers. And I think later in time, this position, like in the British colonies, it was Chinese most of the time. I think in America, we tend to see Jewish people in that position of being the merchants who had the markets all over the place, who were the go-betweens between the white establishment and any groups of people who hadn't yet been accepted into being whiteness or who were always going to be seen as other. So in this situation, they're trying to survive. They have a grocery store where they can allow one side is for the white people and on the other side of the street is for the black people. And the wife works in the store with the white people and the husband works in the store with the black people. And basically their daughter, she goes in between the stores to fetch and run errands as her parents need her to. So when the character, or one of our main characters comes in, he's trying to sell his position, and then a group of black men out there trying to steal his product, and he ends up having to shoot somebody. Well, he didn't have to, but he did. And he's trying to maintain order through force. And he was trying to teach the young girl how to have a job, and all she was supposed to do was wash a truck. And even though she told these people who the truck belonged to, they let their greed get the better of them, and then that resulted in getting shot. Not fatally, just, So, again, we're talking about maybe some kind of longing, people feeling like they had been robbed or they weren't being paid, and they saw opportunity to take from someone else instead of maybe just wait for this man with this truck and ask him for a job. Why not just wait till you get out and say, I'm going to ask whoever this truck belonged to for a job because they look like they got money. Nope. They decided they could push the little girl aside and they was going to take what they wanted. And that resulted in the violence. So then he comes in to try to finish his deal with the Chinese merchant, and the wife comes over and she sees these two people shot outside the store, and she's like, look, you bringing problems. We trying to keep it quiet. We don't want any trouble. We trying to be low key, and you just from the get go, you starting problems. And he's like, yes, but I got money, and I paid him for that trouble outside, and I got more where that came from. And so, because they are the go-betweens, and they trying to make a profit so they can stay profitable, keep their two stores open, and do what they're supposed to do, or what they feel like they've been put in a position to do. She accepts his apology, and she bargains with him for the work he needs done. So he needs a sign painted. But the one thing is they only have red ink or red paint left. So the first thing that occurred to me when I heard red paint, I said, in Japanese and Chinese culture, when you sign a contract, a binding contract, sometimes you have a little square signature that's on a piece of semi-precious stone, and you have it carved into the bottom of it, and then you stamp your contract, you stamp any artwork, you stamp letters with this stamp, because it's you identifying yourself as the creator of whatever it is. So you're the creator of the artwork, you're the creator of the contract, or you're the signer, co-signer of a contract. And it's just like you sign in red because it symbolizes signing in blood. And then the first thing I thought of was when I saw them saying they only had red paint and saw her painting the sign in red. I said, okay, so it's like the sign is almost cursed because it's being signed in blood. So it's one of the first things that I thought about is, so this venture is almost cursed because the way they signed it in blood, it was something that you would avoid, unless it was a lifetime contract, like signing a mortgage or a house or something that, but signing just a sign in red was almost like inviting a curse. And if you notice, when you look at Chinese script or Japanese script, usually, or Chinese script specifically, they'll have red paper with gold, and they'll have red paper with black ink. So they'll do the script in black or gold on top of red, But rarely do you see red on gold paper or red on black paper, because it's like signing a curse. And then if you look at any movies where they use Confucius or Taoist, I'm sorry, Taoist or Taoist magic, they have a yellow piece of paper with red script, because that Taoist sorcerer is casting a spell with essentially a symbol of their own blood, which is the red script. So that's when you see them casting, like sometimes if you look at the Demon Slayer movies, they're trying to put a script, and they try to place it onto the animal or the demon to bind it and to keep it from using whatever demonic powers it has from to be able to attack people. And the scripts they'll carry like a pile of them, of these written scripts, so that they can bind the demon in many different ways. And I felt like they did the opposite of, instead of writing something to bind evil, they wrote something to invite evil. And I didn't know if anybody really talked too much about that within the movie, about red ink being like signing a contract with your own blood. And so I thought, so did the Chinese couple, had they been so separated from their Chinese culture and history that something that should have seemed like definitely, this is not good for us, let's go buy some black ink from somebody's store up the street, that they became lax, or didn't, they were like, oh, it's just superstition, we don't think it'll hurt? Is that kind of what was going on with their thinking when they went ahead and wrote the sign with red ink? So those are some of the takes that I have from it. That are we dealing with some with the disconnection from our ancestors allows us to be open to negative energy. And you don't have to subscribe to any specific religion. We're just talking about our cultural norms were to help us lead, most of the times, were to help us lead consistent, reliable, harmonized, and balanced lives. And it changes because the world changes. So we have to change our cultural norms to adapt to all of the technology and everything as we evolve and become different. But understanding that they were there for a reason, and understanding that we need to adapt and become something different in order to deal with new challenges. When we are halted by fear or ignorance, that we leave a space open for something to come and influence us in a way that's not to our benefit.